of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I, like many of you, have been watching the swirling drama surrounding the confirmation of the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court. The Senate Judiciary Committee heard testimony Thursday from Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh regarding Dr. Ford's assertion that he sexually assaulted her while they were both in high school. For weeks, Republican senators and pundits assailed her character and memory, as well as objected to the process by which her story came to light. Dr. Ford's testimony, in my opinion, was compelling, as she courageously came forward to tell her story. And I, for one, believe her. She admitted that she was terrified as she came forward to be interrogated by those who would judge her veracity. Yet she came anyway. She came even though she and her family faced toxic criticism, death threats, and even had to move out of their home because of the dangerous nature of her monumental decision. She bravely came forward to do what she called her civic responsibility. And in my eyes, she is an American hero. Amen. Because of her witness this past week, other men and women have garnered the courage to come out and tell their own stories of sexual assault and abuse as they finally are able to begin the healing process. Anna Maria Arkilla and Maria Gallagher are also American heroes. These two women were the ones who cornered Senator Jeff Flake in an elevator. They told their stories, and I believe them. Their courage perhaps changed the course of history as they spoke truth to power and demanded an answer from the senator who held the deciding vote on the Judiciary Committee. And perhaps it is because of them that an FBI investigation was forced in order to evaluate Dr. Ford's allegations against Judge Kavanaugh. They flung their bodies in harm's way to fight the demons of injustice. Their witness and their bravery make them heroes. Robin Swirling wrote in the Huffington Post a couple of days ago of her own experience as she sought to tell her story to Senator Lindsey Graham. She wrote, and I quote, "When Senator Graham broke free from the press, I told him that I had been raped 13 years ago and that I didn't know the exact date. Would he believe me despite that? Graham's callous response was to say that he was sorry, but that I needed to go to the police. I don't believe his apology was sincere, she says, but more important, this exchange, along with his treatment of Dr. Ford and countless other women in his tenure in elected office, demonstrated his lack of concern for sexual assault survivors and his complete lack of understanding of the dynamics that keep us from reporting to police. She goes on to say, our stories are real. What happens to us is real. And that is true even if we do not ever disclose it to our families or friends or report it to law enforcement. The response we've seen to Dr. Ford telling her story, she says, and to the other women who have come forward about Brett Kavanaugh is as clear an illustration as any about why people don't report being assaulted. Further, she goes on, Senators Lindsey Graham and Jeff Flake, who was confronted in an elevator Friday morning by Anna Maria Archila and Maria Gallagher, are telling the millions of women with stories just like mine that they do not consider possibly having sexually assaulted someone to be disqualified. It is a clear message that they do not believe that we matter. She goes on to say, Graham told me I should have gone to the police. When I was raped as a sophomore in college, I did consider it. I've also considered it in the years since, though the statute of limitations has since expired. But Senator Graham knew none of that. He only knew that, to his mind, the only way you could possibly be telling the truth was if you reported it to the police. Survivors of sexual violence, she says, don't report to the police for all kinds of reasons, not the least of which are that we see every day how police and our nation's courts, including the one on which Kavanaugh currently sits and the one to which he will likely soon be confirmed, fail to achieve justice for us. We don't report because overwhelmingly the people assaulting us are our boyfriend or friend or family member or coach or clergy, people we've loved and have trusted. We don't report because people of color and LGBTQ people are at risk of surviving violence only to face further victimization through state violence. We don't report because studies show that police officers commit sexual assault and domestic abuse themselves at disproportionately high rates, end quote. These women, and Anita Hill before them, are heroes. And they would not keep silent in the face of injustice. They realized that it was time to speak out. And this morning, beloved, they reminded me of Esther, the woman about whom we read today in our Old Testament lesson, and whose story is recorded in the book bearing her name. I challenge you to go back and read it this week. Esther, one of the two books in the Bible named after a woman, begins with Queen Vashti's refusal to obey a summons from her husband, King Ahasuerus. In this time, women were expected to obey the commands of their husbands. Vashti, the Persian queen who was living in opulence, is cast out of the kingdom for refusing to come to a celebrative feast at the king's command. She loses her crown, she loses her social and political status, and all the privileges associated with her royalty. Queen Vashti's refusal to display her beauty like a showpiece and lose what dignity and integrity she had left put her in an awkward position. I'd imagine in her mind she may have said, "No, I refuse to be exploited by you parading me in front of your friends. No, I refuse to allow you to ill-define me. And through me, the many women whose dignity and respect I represent." Perhaps Vashti, like many women then and now, had one too many disrespectful and insensitive demands placed upon her. I imagine, like Fannie Lou Hamer, the passionate civil rights worker, Vashti was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so, as one of the first woman activists portrayed in ancient culture, Queen Vashti decided to honor her inner voice and take a stand, step out, and speak on behalf of a woman's right to say no. Without a Vashti, there would not be a Queen Esther. Just as there would not be an Angela Davis without a Harriet Tubman, or Maya Angelou without a Phyllis Wheatley. Queen Vashti stood up and prepared the way for Esther, who, like many of us, grew up in the church. But when her cousin Mordecai, one of the many Jews taken into Babylonian captivity, decided to have Esther enter a Persian pageant of sorts designed to replace Queen Vashti, Esther was instructed to keep her Jewish identity and therein her cultural and religious heritage a real secret. Esther was asked by her cousin Mordecai, the one who loved her and the one who raised her after the death of her parents, the one who cared for her well-being and nurtured her faith, the one who taught her how to pray 3 times a day. She was asked by him to please hide her Jewish identity. Mordecai wanted the best for Esther. He wanted her to fit in and be accepted by the Babylonian elite, to be trained in Babylonian arts and culture and educated in the finest Babylonian schools. Esther assimilated and hid her identity well. And for so long, she denied the laws and customs that govern the Jewish people. So when Mordecai asked for help to save their people, Esther forgot who she was. She had adopted the Babylonian hairstyle. She adorned herself with clothes from Babylonian designers and communicated in the king's language and focused on pleasing the king rather than on pleasing the God who had delivered her people out of Egypt. Esther forgot who she was and was trying desperately to be somebody she was not. She forgot that she was a carrier of the promise given by the God of Israel through Sarah. She forgot that she was a descendant of the survivors of the Exodus. It seemed the father, Esther, walked away from her Jewish identity. The smaller Hadassah, if you read in Esther, Hadassah was her original Hebrew name. The smaller Hadassah, her original Hebrew name, became. Esther forgot that she was Hadassah before she was Esther, taken from Jerusalem with her cousin and now living in exile. So when Mordecai learned of the Persian Prime Minister Haman's plan to destroy all the Jews because Mordecai did not bow down to him, Mordecai tore off his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, ran into the middle of Susa, the capital city of Persia, and mourned violently in the streets. We learn in the text that Mordecai was desperately seeking a way to save his people. And through Esther's servant, her attendant, Mordecai urged Esther to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him on behalf of the Jews. But when you forget who you are and want to distance yourself from where you came from, you become silent on social and political issues that will adversely impact your present and future life. Initially, Esther hesitated to give away her secret. For breaking secrets can mean personal exposure and ridicule and rejection. Just ask Dr. Ford. Young girls who are molested by family members or future judges. Altar boys who are molested by priests or women who are abused by spouses have extreme difficulty giving voice to their silent pain and suffering. Family members who have lost loved ones or experienced delays in their ability to give voice to their grief struggle are in that number. The patient man, Job, struggled for 7 days before giving voice to his grief over the loss of his children and possessions and health. It took Maya Angelou several years after being raped to break her silence and talk. Gay men and women struggle with breaking the silence for fear of losing their jobs, their public offices, or their credibility. Esther did not want to break the silence about her Jewish identity, for it would have meant sacrificing the royal crown and possibly sacrificing her life. But if she did not, it would mean the destruction of all the Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day. I've come to understand in my years on this earth that women have always had difficult choices to make between personal freedom and financial security, between self-preservation and the survival of their families and community and their people. What would you choose? Vashti chose personal freedom for all the Jews at the expense of giving up all the splendor of the Persian kingdom. Why did Vashti choose to give it all up? Well, feminist theologians, women who seek to understand God and want to interpret Scripture from the perspective of gender equality and justice would say simply that it was time. It was time to break the silence and challenge the systems, structures, norms, traditions, and laws that defined women but excluded their contributions to family, culture, and history. They would say that it was just time. and speak to the subordinate role of women and honor what has been called the sacred feminine. The sacred feminine that's in all of us. The sacred feminine is the concept that God ultimately is neither anthropomorphically male or female, but a divine essence beyond form and duality. An essence that is imbalance and unification of masculine and feminine principles. The sacred feminine. And womanist theologians would add to a feminist perspective the unique experiences of black women, our mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers of the African diaspora. These were women whose voices were muzzled, women who might have been, but were not allowed to be. So they died, stifled, and with unborn contributions within them. Vashti chose to stand up and break the silence of her oppression. But what would Esther choose? What would Esther choose? All Esther could hear in her head, I believe, was her cousin Mordecai saying, as recorded in the book, "For if you keep silent at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows, perhaps you have come to royal dignity for such a time as this." Sisters and brothers, I was convicted this week because I realized that we have been silent for too long. We have closed the doors to our emotional pain and suffering, and we will not say a word. We continue to accept broken hearts because of our desire to keep a man or a woman close. Therefore, we say nothing about the interpersonal injustices, infidelity, and abuse. We are losing the trust and respect of young black America because we are not willing to give voice to our own anxieties about the hip-hop generation and its revolutionary message. We have been silent on issues related to black male-female relationships, silent on issues related to the civil and human rights of gay men and women. We have been silent on issues of sexuality and the black church. It's time to break the silence. Do not let fear of losing privilege, becoming vulnerable or exposed, hinder you from breaking the silence. Give voice to the injustices in your personal space, and in your workplace, and in your community, in your church, and in the world. Break the silence. Break the silence like Anita Hill did. Break the silence like Dr. Christine Ford. Break the silence like Anna Maria Arquilla and Maria Gallagher. Break the silence like Deborah Ramirez and Julie Swetnick. Break the silence like Robin Swirling. Esther's second reply to Mordecai was this. She said, and it is recorded, "After I fast for 3 days, night and day, I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. If I perish, I perish." God was working in Esther. She grabbed hold of her faith and fell to her knees and asked God for fearless courage to do the work that God had called her to do. You too, beloved, on faith can break the silence and carry with you the truth of who you are. There will always come a time when the silence must be broken and the truth must be told. A time when some addicted person will fall down and say, "My life has become unmanageable." A time when a mother and father that she's having a baby, a time when a son must tell his parents that he is gay, a time when a husband must tell his wife that he's been unfaithful. There will always come a time when women must stand up to be heard, a time when the people must fight for their lives and strive to be free, a time when a slave must call out, "Oh, freedom, before I be a slave, I be buried in my grave and go home to be with Jesus and be free." There will always come a time when a sojourner of truth must stand to proclaim the rights of women, a time when a Richard Allen must break away and start a new thing, the AME Church, a time when Rosa Parks must sit down and a Martin Luther King must stand up, a time when the everlasting God must step out into the Garden of Eden and call out to all